Welcome to Satsang. That which is aware of everything taking place in your life, and that which is allowing you to be aware of everything that may be going on in the world, is consciousness, your true nature. And as awareness, as that which is aware, there is no discriminating, there is no analysis, there is no judgment, no thought process involved in that awareness. As awareness, there is simply awareness. There is simply a witnessing of everything taking place as it is. So, as an awareness that is aware of everything as it is, there is no memory associated with what it is that you are witnessing. There is simply a presence as awareness taking place in the moment. And as such, this awareness is both aware of everything taking place outside of you as everything taking place inside of you. As this thinker that you may come to take yourself to be as a process of thinking, along with the idea that you are this body and that everything you're sensing, everything you're feeling is only about yourself, about this I, about this I thought, this thinker, this perceiver, observer. When what is actually taking place is that on the level of the body, on the level of the mind, on the level of all perceptions, feelings and thoughts, and as the thinker of all of these is actually taking place in awareness as consciousness, without which none of these would ever take place on whatever level. Thus, the reality of your life is that of consciousness, out of which there is an awareness of everything taking place on the level of where you take yourself to be as this thinker, and as whatever you may be feeling, sensing, and so on, as of what it is that you perceive of the world. So it is not like you rise as this individual, and that as an individual you shall reach for something like consciousness outside of you. As if you came from the world of matter and you were born with a sense of I attached to this mind body, out of which you shall seek for consciousness as something higher than yourselves, something outside of yourself. The truth of the matter is that you rise as consciousness, consciousness being already that which alone is. And out of that consciousness, you develop a sense of I thought. And out of that notion of an I thought, there is the mind and the body and the world. So without consciousness, none of yourself, as this idea of yourself, would even arise. And so none of this body consciousness would either arise, nor the perception of a world. So therefore, what is really necessary in order for you to understand the purpose of your life is to understand the source of who you are. So in understanding the source of yourself, you come to understand the purpose of life, the purpose and the reason of this world. For all come from the same source as consciousness. Once you understand consciousness as being the very foundation of all existence, then you realize the purpose of this existence. For all is consciousness, that which is simply aware of being aware. So even if, for instance, you are caught in your mind worrying about this world, especially in these present time, these worries, these thoughts, this whole mental chattering must take place at something. In order for you to even be aware that you may be thinking, there must first be an awareness of this taking place, which means that awareness is that which is prior to any thought process, to any perceived world. And so awareness as such is that which neither comes nor goes. As the mind comes and goes, and as the perceived world also comes and goes. So anything in your experience that does not come nor go is consciousness alone, that which simply remains aware. So because it is permanent, that alone is reality. The reality of yourself, the reality of all thoughts, feelings, sensation, and the reality of this world. Ascension into the divine is not something to be understood as something away from consciousness itself being the only reality in this now. Ascension of the divine means that you recognize the very nature of yourself as that, as consciousness, as awareness itself. At that moment, you somehow withdraw from the illusion of separation. The separation that comes out of the way you perceive a will as outside of yourself, as you perceive a will inside of yourself in opposition to this outer world. Ascension into the divine is to acknowledge that you are consciousness and stand in that as awareness, as that which neither comes nor goes. And because it neither comes nor goes, it is eternal. Being eternal, it is divine. Being eternal, it is one. Being one, it is divine. Not touchable by anything of this world. Untouchable by whatever may be going on with your sensations, with your feelings, with your mind, and with what you call yourself. Therefore, it is divine. So ascension, it is as if you come to realize that your true self stand independently from everything taking place in your experience on the level of this mind-body personnel, as of what is received or of what may be going on in the world. And So, because it is already the only reality in your experience, it is therefore accessible at any given moment. If only you allowing yourself, your awareness to sink into itself, independently from mind activity, independently from what it is that you may feel, sense, or perceive as the world, independently from anything of the world. So, how do you do that? How do you sink in within? The only thing you are sure of in your experience in this moment is that you are, or that you may simply say that all there is what is as it is. So if you stand with that alone, that which is, then necessarily you come to go inside, to fuse with what it is that is really here and now. And therefore, consciousness rises as being that which you are in truth. Once you're there, no matter what may have been taking place in your mind, is seen in that light. So, therefore, from the light of your true self, you come to witness whether whatever you may have been thinking about is of any value or not. And so, if the thinking process comes to be seen simply as a thinking process, then no matter what you may have been thinking about in relation with the world, also is revealed in that light as to whether it has any value or not. So, in your present experience, you can always discern as to whether you stand in consciousness or whether you're engaged in your mental activity, and thereby becoming concerned by what is going on the level of the world. If you recognize that the world only takes place in your seeing, in your mental activity, that it does not exist independently from your mental activity, then how much are you going to keep believing that what it is you perceive of the world is real? So there is no moment where you cannot discern whether you are in the mind giving a reality to the world or whether you're standing as the truth of yourself as consciousness. And that within consciousness there is fullness of being. There is liberation from the mind and therefore liberation from the world, no matter what may be going on in the world or in yourself, within your mind. So because consciousness is your truth, because consciousness is that which alone neither comes nor goes, it can be found in any given moment. If you're allowing your sense of attention to revert within, as opposed to being lost in a world of thoughts and feelings. And yet, if you see that you may be that engaged in your mind or in feelings and so on, you can always look at it as it is and discern whether you stand in consciousness of that again, you are pursuing what it is that is going on with your mind or your feeling, and thereby standing as consciousness. For consciousness is not in conflict with whatever may be going on in your mind or in the world. It's simply witness everything as it is. And as there is a witnessing of everything as it is, there is liberation from this sense of self attached to this mind body. Therefore, peace, clarity, answer to this purpose of existing. And purpose of this world. So in fact, every moment is an opportunity to realize the self, consciousness. Every moment is an invitation to acknowledge the truth of yourself and to stand as that. Because it is thus accessible at any given moment, you may call it grace, for it is a gift, it is a given that you can recognize yourself as consciousness, and any doubt or difficulties in acknowledging that you are consciousness first and foremost, and to see that you can tap into it at any given moment, no matter what takes place in your mind, in your life, or in the world. No matter whether the world is in a dark place right now or not. Can the darkness be seen from the light of consciousness? If you see consciousness as your own self, then naturally you come to trust that all comes from consciousness and returns to consciousness. That consciousness is the only reality. So all darkness ends in the light of consciousness. And consciousness being, in truth, the only reality, it is accessible at any given moment, directly, without any intermediaries. Needs no reasons, no need of anything to be any different for you to tap into the truth that you are consciousness. The light that gives birth to anything, everything. Even when you witness that you fluctuate from acknowledging that you are consciousness and reverting back into the idea that you are bound to this mind body and suffering from it, you can still see it. You can still see what it is you're doing, isn't it? And because you can always see what it is you're doing, necessarily it means that you must be awareness first and foremost. In other words, you never lose awareness. You never lose consciousness by pursuing the mind, by pursuing what it is that you may perceive of yourself or of the world. Then it appears as if consciousness is moving out of your experience. But the truth is the opposite. The truth is that you never leave consciousness. Consciousness remains the only reality at all times, no matter what. Everything else you think, everything else you perceive comes from the mere attachment to whatever may be taking place on those levels. Which means that whatever you may be thinking at the moment, it is because you are giving it importance that all of a sudden it feels as if consciousness is something outside of yourself or that you've lost it. And yet, even when you're caught in your mind, you can witness it as it is, isn't it? That means that consciousness as awareness is always there. That it is yourself at all times. And even when you look at the world and take the world to be a certain way, as dark as it may appear, especially in these times, you can always question yourself, question whether it is in relation with what it is that you think or feel or not. And now, and necessarily you'll see that this is something that you are holding on to yourself as thoughts and feelings that is giving a reality to what you call the world. And if you let go of it, you also change your experience of the world, of the so-called darkness. And indeed, if you are aware to the point where you are no longer giving any importance to what it is you perceive or think, then the world is also revealed as consciousness. And whatever may be taking place in the world is bound to rise and to subside in consciousness. Therefore, however dark this world may appear, is bound to resolve itself back to the light. Thereby, the victory of the light is absolute. And if there is such experience of darkness, supposedly outside, it is more important to see what it is that within you is holding on to these perceptions or feelings, and to see whether you can use that as a pointer to consciousness. to see that you can just simply let go of it and abide in what is. Abide as the truth of yourself, as consciousness, and to experience the resolve of it in that moment, as within any given moment whatsoever. For the world must be confirmed by you first. If you are not there, where is the world? If there is no one there to recognize a world that's perceived outside of yourself, where is such a world? So if you can see in the relativity of everything perceivable, then necessarily it means that something in you is absolute, that is not depending on anything perceivable, thinkable, or touchable. Therefore, consciousness is that which is the reality of this world and of yourself, of your thoughts, your feelings, your sensation, of anything perceivable on all levels. Therefore, you can tap into it, acknowledge it, and stabilize yourself in it at any given moment. Therefore, it must be of a divine nature. So ascension in the divine is simply the truth of your experience. So being caught in something, we seek a way out. When all that is necessary is to see where you are in the moment, to see yourself as you are in the moment. At the mere moment you do that, acknowledge everything as it is, you step out of it, because you come to see clearly that you may be giving too much importance on the level of mind, on the level of what it is you perceive of your life or of the so-called world. And you come naturally to let go of that which creates this illusion of division with consciousness, with the truth of yourself. So it is not like you need to do certain things in order to get out of feeling entangled in something. All you need to do, if I can use this word, is simply acknowledge what is what in the moment, and to rest in that seeing alone. As much as you can remain in that seeing, as much as the futility of what may have been taking place in your mind will reveal itself. Therefore, will be discarded. When the futility of my activity is discarded, the piece of your true nature is imminently experienced in that moment as something that never actually left you. And no matter what is taking place on the level of perception, no matter what is taking place on the level of the world, you can always question yourself as to ask yourself when going through some difficulties of whatever sorts or on whatever level, whether you're actually pursuing thoughts in your mind or not. And if you're honest with yourself, you will see that this is what you're doing. Yes, but this is what's going on in the world, therefore I must experience this sorrow. This is what the mind does. It tells story to itself. It comes to believe in these stories. And yet you can simply watch it, watch the whole process and not superimpose thoughts over thoughts. You just see the thought process as it is. And if you see that it is just a thought process, then you can also just let go of it. You remain in your natural state as peace, as clarity, as awareness, as consciousness. Within seconds of willingness to stand as yourself, as you are.
Listening to you those years ago in Vancouver, what just blew me away was all these years I thought what I was looking for had something to do with the personal me. The personal me would find it. And when this spontaneous thing happened, it's completely impersonal. I always thought Ken was the subject and the content of experience was the object. But in this experience, this impersonal energy field, that's the object, or that's the subject. And even me, this personal me, which I thought was me, is part of the content of experience. The way I became familiar with it was that it's not everything that I'm feeling and experience is just the content. And when I defocus the content, then awareness is felt. And the feeling of this being an appearance becomes clear. But for so many years, I was always looking into the content of experience, which seemed to preclude me from allowing or me to realize awareness, the feeling, the familiarity of awareness, and how impersonal it was. It just appears. But if you would comment if any of that.
What we call ourselves is what we think of ourselves. Without the thoughts of ourselves, where are we? Who are we without the thoughts associated with ourselves? There is no such a thing. There remains only an awareness or what it is that you may be thinking, or even what it is that may allow us to even be aware of that. So therefore, it is the impersonal itself, which is experiencing itself through all these forms.
Can awareness be aware of itself without this content of experience? Without this appearance in itself?
Yes, that is its beauty. For instance, you can see that you are or not aware of your thoughts, right? And you can also see that you are awareness. Something is aware that you may be aware. Even in all of a sudden, there is no longer an awareness of thoughts, or that thoughts are no longer there. Like when you experience the absence of thoughts, when you experience the silence, the emptiness, something is aware of that. Something is aware that it is aware of being aware. Awareness does not need a content in order to be aware that it is aware. So now, this is the interesting thing. You can live your life without assuming that you need to do anything in order to be more or less than what you are. That consciousness alone is complete and already perfect, already the beginning and the end of it all.
And Destiny, can you also comment on the absolute? Is it a deepening of the awareness or universal consciousness? Seems to be like a dark backdrop when awareness seems to reside in itself. There seems to be a dark backdrop to it. And from my reading, I'm just curious how or if you could explain the absolute in relation to what you're speaking to about tonight, in relation to awareness.
Awareness, consciousness, the absolute, the impersonal, all the same. But here we must be careful that what it is we may be understanding on the level of awareness is not simply something of mind. Because if it's simply something of mind, that's when you get caught in the absolute view kind of thing. As if all of a sudden this whole world of your whole life were to be nothing. When in reality, because everything is of the nature of the absolute, everything is allowed, everything has its purpose in the absolute, as if to confirm the existence of the absolute. So far from becoming a dark place, it is in fact the birth of the world, the birth also of yourself, and everything you yourself as a person can become. Because then you become infused by the truth, by the light, by the totality that life really is in terms of how it flows through yourself. So far from seeing your life or yourself becoming something non-existent, it is the opposite. So not only your life comes to flourish in manners that you wouldn't be able to achieve otherwise. But you also simultaneously develop a sense of detachment, of simplicity, humanity, and of total allowance to this impersonal, to be at the heart of yourself and of your life and of the world. So when it stays on the level of the mind, like the things you may be understanding about consciousness or awareness or the absolute, you must pay attention to that too. Acknowledge that it may be some things that you're thinking about or holding in your mind as if you had understood some things as knowledge. Acknowledge that, and as you acknowledge it, then of course you are free from it, thereby not getting caught in the absolute you.
Yeah, there's the mind body that gets curious when it thinks it knows something, when it has knowledge. But awareness, or my experience when I go back and forth, or when I move from awareness to the personal me and back and forth, then I realize there's no knowledge of this. It's such a vast difference, because my mind body, after experiences what I would call, or seems to be, universal consciousness, then it formulates what's happening and how the world is. But when it goes back into awareness, it's kind of funny, because then I think I know something. I think there's knowledge that has been obtained, but the freeing part is there's no knowledge. There's nothing. But at the same time, this human being form also seems to have these insights, which also seem to have a place. So it's a moving back and forth for me, which sometimes I get caught up, and it's hard to know, am I seeing some insight? Am I experiencing some knowledge that I think I have obtained now? I've realized something. Or is it imagination that's running away with it? But the grounding is in the awareness. That's when, and it's not on demand for me. I can't just do it necessarily. It doesn't just occur. I'm still me most of the time, or the personal me. But I do have frequent periods throughout the day and in my life where I do abide in awareness, and I see that it's all just an appearance. And that's the liberating part, is that all that knowledge insights I had is just the mind commenting on what has been experienced.
Mm.
That makes sense. But it's hard because I just have my books, and I don't have anyone to share these experiences with. And so it's hard, like I said, it's hard to know what am I making? What am I making knowledge? Am I making some idea out of it? Or when I get grounded in awareness, I do see that awareness is all. And there's no questions there.